Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Joburg Community of Practice session today. And today we are going to be exploring the object relations. Just before I start, a quick plug for a workshop that I'm going to be doing next year on the 23rd and 24th of January. 2-day in-depth workshop, the first of 9, first one dealing with 7. So it's really going into a lot of depth. I'm going to be looking at the origins of the type. So how does it originate in the lost childhood wound? The heart wound, the lost childhood message, the family whole, the loss of essence. So really a lot of focus on that. And then some of the kind of type structure and dynamics basics, subtypes, development pathways, spiritual dimensions, coaching tips, etc., etc. So really a 2-day deep dive as well as immersion in this type. And this will be the structure for every workshop for each of the 9. So yeah, coaches, facilitators, and type 7s, people married to type 7s, God help you. People with 7 bosses, God help you. And I'm allowed to say this because I'm a 7. And so you'll get the real highs and lows and almost an experiential sense of the inner life and struggles of 7, which is often idealized. People say they want to be a 7, but they don't really know what they're talking about. But after this, they will, and they'll stop saying it. So that's upcoming January 23rd and 24th, a weekend. If you're interested, please email me for more information. And my email address is here, Ingrid@. I'm copied on the invite. So yeah, if you're interested, let me know. Cool. So today, object relations. So object relations are one of the really, really most important triads in the Enneagram. We've got the object relations, the harmonics, the Horneyvians, obviously the centers, then there are the harmony triads. But really the object relations are a big one because they form our psyche at a very, very young age. And they then become the emotional background of a lot of what we do. And as you know, the emotional background and the heart center is really the energetic driver of our type. So no matter what type you are, that core passion, the passion is a heart quality. So the heart suffering is what drives our fixation, our addictive patterns in our behavior. So understanding this is a genuine breakthrough in Enneagram work. And when we can sit with and contain the wound that has given rise to this fixation or preoccupation, we are able to make big breakthroughs in our journey and really ease through a lot of what causes us to operate from that mechanical ego, as Gurdjieff put it. So we stop being slaves to this dynamic. So I can't really overemphasize the extent to which this triad is core. The others, yes, they speak about our relating, our way of handling conflict and frustration, but this one is kind of psychic bedrock, and it really informs most things. So a little bit more on this. So as I said, it's about how the psyche itself is developed. So at some level, conceptually, we do enter life almost as a tabula rasa. Not entirely, because the epigenetics, there's our temperamental stuff, our neurological wiring, and but we don't have any conceptual apparatus, I don't like that word, but anyway, in place in our first year until we start developing language. So it's through our interaction with the world and with objects in our external environment that we start constituting a sense of self, a basic sense of continuity of self, a basic sense that we exist in relation to things and that we can either rely on reality or we can't, that we can feel safe in our experience and in our inner being or not. And so this is the primary formation of our sense of not identity in the conceptual sense of who am I, but of being, of our being in the world, and a sense of I am here and this is me. So it's very deep. And so in this object relations, we're forming relations. The earliest is to the mother, because we are completely dependent on her for survival. Obviously, from the moment of conception, there's no separate us. And even when we're born, there's no sense of separation, because we are so radically dependent on her for our survival. But then through the processes that happen after that, we start getting a sense that she's not us and we're not her. And that's the beginning of our subjectivity. So that's the first archetype that is an object. The second one is the father archetype. I don't mean the literal father, and the mother could play that role as well, but that's the figure that doesn't represent nurturance like the mother does necessarily. It represents protection, guidance, structure. So it's a very archetypal sense of father. Order, rules. So it's the very masculine kind of public domain that we have a sense of growing up, is that there is structure. There's what Lacan calls the logos, which is the symbolic order. So the mother isn't necessarily in that space with us. She's in a very primary, tactile, emotional regulation relationship with us. The mother helps us to regulate our nervous system through her nervous system, through her holding. Whereas the father gives us a sense of a symbolic order that we're born into. Language. So that's that archetype. And then we've got the family system as a whole. So as a child, we're going to become conscious of how are these parents interacting? What's going on here? What is the emotional energy of my world? And the child forms a relationship with that familial world and has a sense of, okay, so this is what earthly life is like. Now they kind of land here and they've got to figure it out. So there's the mother, the father, and the household, home, and context. And these are all objects that the child then develops a relationship with. So that's quite important. Then the object relations also inform how we experience loss, because it's about our attachment and relationships to the things that make us feel secure, safe, connected, belong. So when we experience loss, it's going to trigger very primary wounding. Our internal fantasy life, and that might be strange because it's all about objects, but what happens is we introject the idea of the object, and we almost use the mother to establish a sense of continuity within ourselves. So this is a Winnicott concept. For those of you who've studied Winnicott, you'll know a hell of a lot better than me. But basically this idea of using an external object to develop an inner sense of continuity of experience. And if the mother is reliable and stable and consistent, then we start developing an internal fantasy life in which we feel as though the world is trustworthy. And we also feel safe within our own experience. So you can see how traumatization in early childhood leads to a fundamental lack of safety in the self. If you read Gabor Mate, those are the kinds of things that will lead to addiction, because there's so much inner suffering and so much of an absence of an ability to comfort oneself at an inner level. So that could be a 2-hour digression. But just to get you to really understand how this object relations thing plays out. So it's loss, fantasy life, and self-concept. So it's what do I have to do and how do I have to act to feel safe? And you'll see how that translates into our type. So this is all very pre-conscious. It's not a self-concept like, oh, I have to be successful. Not at all, because this is happening like before we turn 3 even. Okay, so I hope that lays some groundwork for you conceptually and theoretically. It's quite fascinating stuff. So if you want to read more, it's Melanie Klein, Winnicott, Fairbairn. So there are a number of very important theorists in this tradition, object relations psychology, and it's called psychodynamic psychology. Winnicott is wonderful and lovely. Melanie Klein's a bit of a nightmare. Sorry, Kleinians. I know Kleinians are generally devotees. Okay, so now we come to what are the 3 fundamental affects. Affect is the psychology term for feeling and emotion. To try and get some academic distance on it, they invent the term affect, but we're basically talking about feeling. If you read the work of Dan Siegel or listen to the interview with him on the most recent Enneagram Summit, absolutely fascinating. There are 3 subcortical circuits in our brains. The one is anger. Guess what? The 8, 9, and 1. The action center, the gut center. The one is shame or sadness, which is the feeling center, 2, 3, and 4. And then we have got the anxiety circuit in the brain subcortically. And these are the things that get triggered at the most basic survival level. So you'll see some of this playing out here. And there are responses that are built in to those things. So if we experience the activation of the anger circuit in our brain, then we are going to respond in one of 3 ways. And you'll see what that is. It's either going to be the 8 response, the 9 response, or the 1 response. So I'll show you how that works in a minute. But that's some fundamentals there. Okay, so these are some of the affects that are going on. So the first one is the attachment question that arises in the infant subconsciously. Is I've got something I want, I'm being fed, I'm being held, I'm comfortable and warm and safe. How do I keep this? How do I keep this from going away? So when my mom puts me down in my cot and walks out and I'm supposed to go to sleep and I'm very unhappy about that, what do I need to do to make it stay? And that then starts forming the foundation of a certain approach to being in relationship with the object. Then we've got the frustration triad, where this wonderful thing is here, this mom, I'm being fed, I'm safe and I'm warm, but I want more. I'm still hungry and she's put me down. I want more. I don't feel like she's made enough eye contact with me. I don't feel quite safe. I don't feel quite visible. I don't feel quite held. How do I get more of this? And if it's not around at all, how do I get it at all? And you can imagine if you put yourself in that mindset, you're a tiny baby lying in the cot screaming your head off. And that's very primary. It's what babies have to do to survive, and it's all they've got. It's basically, how do I get it? Is the unconscious question that's playing in their mind. And then the rejection is, how do I avoid rejection? So that's the other affective response to feeling unsure, unsure of the whole thing. So if a child experiences rejection, like if the baby's crying and the mother is exhausted in the middle of the night and she gets frustrated and stressed, and anybody who's had a baby has been here, and she gets cross with the baby, and she, it could go to any extreme. It could be just frustration and an energetic reaction of, fuck, shit, will this baby ever sleep? To actually shaking the baby. Some parents get even worse. But that is going to cause at least some level of a primary trauma. So trauma is not necessarily being locked in a cupboard. It's a sense of not feeling safe. So that's what is called everyday trauma. It's a basic everyday trauma, and every single human being experienced it. So that's the rejection response is, how do I avoid rejection when my mom is angry with me at 2 o'clock in the morning? So these questions are obviously not verbal. They're obviously not conceptual. They're an emotional sense. So this is the psychodynamic theory around this from an Enneagram perspective. Okay, so here's what I was rushing forward into a little bit earlier. So if you look at the anger center, the 8, 9, and 1, the foundational affect, the feeling underneath that drives the fixations is anger. The way that these types respond, there are 3 ways of responding. So the 8 responds with the rejection response. How do I avoid being rejected? Guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to armor up. I'm going to put on my armor, and I'm going to become as invulnerable as possible. So I'm just going to be as tough as I need to be to handle this. That's the rejection. The attachment response is both an internal and an external focus. And it's, how do I keep this thing? How do I keep this feeling of feeling safe and warm? And this wonderful cuddly blankie of mama being here. So that's the 9 response, is this deep attachment to the feeling of feeling warm and safe and the harmony. So that's, you can understand how a 9 will narcotize as the defense mechanism. They're basically trying to reconnect with that feeling. So that's what's going on with 9. And then we have got the 1, which responds to the rage of their center with frustration. So when the mom's not there, when I'm not being fed enough, when she's not present enough, there's the frustration kicks in. So I'm using the maternal example in every case, which is very partial because the other layers are the father figure and the family. So you're going to see that each one has a specific focal point of frustration. So it's not all frustration with mom. Some it's frustration with dad, some it's frustration with family, but you'll get a sense of that in a second. But this is the basic thing that I want you to notice here, is that you've got a rejection, an attachment, and a frustration per center. And that's what forms the triads. So you can see there are 3 frustrations. It's the 7, the 1, and the 4. There are 3 rejections, 8, 2, and 5. And there are 3 attachments, the inner circle. So there you go. That's basically the core thing of this slide, is that you've got each effective response per center. And that's like the foundation of the type. It's the most basic essence of the reality strategy of the type. And that gives rise to the passion, the ego structure, the defense mechanism, the fixation. And the heart wound is kind of resides in the object relations. So you can see how frustration and starving heart go together. So I've got an inner starvation for more attention, more connection, more love, more food. The lost childhood message of 7 is your needs will be met. So you can see how all of this translates into my needs won't be met. I'm starving. What am I going to do? Grasp, grasp, grasp. So there's a dynamic like that for every type. The 2 feels severed from love, from the source of love, disconnected. So that gives rise to a fear of rejection. So 2s then develop the strategy of, what can I do to build connection and avoid rejection? And we all know what that then looks like. In the self-praise 2, it's, I'm going to be as cute as possible. In the other 2 subtypes, I am going to help you so much that I'm indispensable and you adore me and think I'm amazing. And I'm going to attract as much flattery as possible. You're going to say, I'm so amazing, because I am. because I go the extra 15 billion miles that no one else would go, and that's going to make you love me. So this is how these object relations are at the core of the genesis of the ego strategy. Am I making sense? Can I have some thumbs up, or like totally confused, don't have a clue? Okay, cool. Okay, brilliant. Okay, so some fundamentals. We're going to kind of spiral around and get deeper as we go along. Okay, so these object relations triads are exactly the same triads as David Daniels' harmony triads. And they are very differentiated, and David Daniels went to a lot of effort to differentiate them from Risa and Hudson's object relations triads, but I still like to bring them together because there is an important connection. So what's called frustration in object relations is called idealists, the idealists in David Daniels. And you can see how frustration and idealism could go together. Like, I'm frustrated with the world as it is, so let me think of a better one. So it's almost like a flip side of frustration is idealism. And I find this helpful to talk about with clients. So if someone's got a 714 tri-type, I say, triple idealism. And that's a much gentler way to go into their ego strategy than to say, you're frustration triad. That's a bit more positive. In David Daniels, the rejection triad of 258 is called the relationists. So instead of saying rejection, you can say what they're really looking for is connection and relating, and they want to be able to feel safe and vulnerable with somebody. Okay, and be able to let their guard down and be able to stop doing their thing to try and be loved and accepted and good enough. And then we've got the attachment triad, which is called the pragmatists in David Daniels. So that's really trying to come to terms with how to be in the world. So I find that quite useful. It's not part of the object relations triad, though. It's just me bringing them together because I like to. Okay. So let's get a little bit more into this, if there are any things we've left out here. So there's the triangle mapped onto the attachment. So it's the question of how do I perpetuate the connection. So, and it's not necessarily the connection with the object in this case. The object is a kind of inner object as well. So it's a state that's working for me. So in the 9, it's that state of inner harmony, comfort, no ripples, no conflict. I just feel lovely and soft. So that's the state I'm looking for. With the 3, it's the attachment becomes to positive regard. So that the idealized self-image that generates the positive regard is something that I get attached to because that thing works for me. And then I get addicted to doing it because obviously you need more and more of it. There's never going to be enough because you constantly have to maintain this connection. You're not going to keep it if you stop. That's the unconscious fear, is that if I stop with my self-disconnection and my performance according to an image, then I'm going to lose the love. I'm going to lose the approval. I'm going to lose the good feeling. So you can see how it's a never-ending trap. Okay. Then 6s, how am I going to keep this thing of feeling safe? So this is obviously in the anxiety center. The head center is all about anxiety as the underlying subcortical region. And what the 6 is going to do is say, okay, I need to be part of a relationship with a group of people. So I better exhibit an allegiance and loyalty to some kind of ideology. So whatever I need to do to show people that I'm part of their gang or that I'm a loyal adherent to this particular leader. So, the Social 6 goes for the allegiance with an ideological system. So you can imagine I'm going to join the EFF and I'm going to be the best communist ever, and I'm going to speak communist ideology every time I open my mouth. So that might be what you see a 6 doing. For those not from South Africa, the EFF is a kind of Trotskyite party, communist party at the most extreme left. Otherwise, attaching to my immediate family as a self-praise 6 and to my home, and then the counter type being much more ambivalent. So attaching to the idea of strength and beauty and being a rebel. So there are 3 different ways, very different for the different subtypes, but you can get the picture of how this works for this triad. The fundamental thing that you want to remember here is, how do I keep this? How do I keep this feeling? The good feeling. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, rejection types. You're going to see the 3 strategies for thinking about rejection. So there was something good and lovely, but then it hurt. So my mom fed me, held me, rocked me, and then after she'd been doing that for 2 hours and walking down and up and down the passage, doing that thing that you have to do with babies, she eventually got very tired and started getting a bit mean. So now what? The 8s experience it as a kind of betrayal, profound wounding, and in that moment of betrayal, of say the mother screaming at them, they're going to experience the heart wound of the dying heart. So you know that moment when someone you love turns on you. It's a feeling of you almost die in that moment. So that's the 8 experience of the wounding. The attachment wound is, oh my God, I can't trust this source of love. It's going to hurt me. Then the 5 gets the same type of thing, the 2 o'clock frustration of the mother, and then decides that it's not going to be vulnerable by holding people at bay. So the baby then becomes quite withdrawn, and the isolation is the defense mechanism. So if I isolate myself, I'm going to be less vulnerable to that hurt because I've preempted it. Before someone's even had a chance to hurt me, I've kept them at arm's length. So the 8 has got the armor, the 5 has got the space and the arm's length to avoid the hurt, and then the 2 has got the, I'm going to connect with you at all costs, even if it means completely disconnecting from my own inner life and heart, is because I need you, and I will do whatever it takes to get that connection with you. And that's what we feel with 2s. We feel them reaching for us and needing our energy. So in each of these cases, what you're picking up at an energetic level from the type is this emotional energy. And you can feel that the 2 is trying to avoid being rejected by you. And paradoxically, the way that they behave causes rejection. 5s cause rejection because they don't let you in. 8s cause rejection because they can be, how 8s can be, big, tough. You can't get in, so you give up. So they all elicit the thing that they're trying to avoid. Each type does that. It backfires. And this is the thing that the Enneagram reveals to us, is that the ego strategy is fundamentally misguided. It's never going to get us what we need. It's never going to get us true ease of being. It's never going to give us the inner peace that we're looking for. And so the Enneagram articulates a pathway for us of how we give up on that ego strategy as our solution. How we give up on that misguided path that we put all our energy into. Chris Hurwitz speaks about how an addiction robs us of our life and energy. And if we consider our ego strategy and addiction, that's what it does. It actually robs us of our core spiritual energy. And the Enneagram says to us, you know what, there's another way. And when you ease through that defense mechanism and you're able to be with and recognize the terror-stricken heart as a 6, or the dying heart as an 8, then we start being able to experience the heart quality that is the opposite. So for 7, you stop feeling starving and manically starving. You start feeling a quiet sobriety. Your heart, if you move to 5, you feel a non-attachment. You can just be with the world. The 8 starts to be able to experience their softness and innocence because they become, less in need of putting up those barriers and that denial. So we all start moving towards our virtue as the legit, real path towards ease of being. So this is the real amazing gift of this system. And it's a genuine spiritual tool. Okay. Where's my cursor gone? Okay. So that's the rejection types. And then the frustration types. So we've got the 714. And what's going on here, as I said earlier, is how do I get this thing? How do I get this ease? How do I get this comfort? How do I get this just sense of safety and connection? In Imago and Harville Hendrix's work, they speak about the fundamental need of every person is for safety and connection in relationship. And 7s, 4s, and 1s are after that and feel an immense deficit of safety or connection. Or okayness, like a fundamental okayness in the case of 1. So then the strategy kicks in. So 1s end up trying to be perfect, often very inconsistent parenting, inconsistent discipline for a 1. So they are on eggshells. They don't know what they need to do to elicit love and affection. So they try and be perfect. So they focus that strategy inwards, say, okay, I'm going to put all my energy into trying to be the perfect person. So it's an inward directed process. Then you've got the 7s. Okay, let me go to 4. So the 4s experience that profound lack, and it becomes a sense of what is wrong with me that I can't get love. So that's the introjection, a very, very painful, stabbed heart feeling of something's wrong with me. I'm missing something. Something's absent from me, that I'm unlovable at a very fundamental level. So that is why you can see why shame, the shame of 4, the false lack. I mean, it is a false lack, but you can imagine the emotional quality of walking around as a 4, feeling like there's something really, really wrong with you and that other people have it and you don't. So if you think about envy, instead of thinking, oh, I'm looking at that person and thinking, oh, wow, I want that, it's not that at all. It's looking at someone who's fundamentally just basically okay. They might be just functioning in their life. And then the self-comparison kicks in, like, oh, I'm not doing that. I can't do that. What's wrong with me? I'm so much less of a person. So this false lack is at the level of self. So surprise, surprise, that 4s experience a lot of depression. Obviously, there are gifts there that get translated into incredible beauty and illumination for the world. But we've got to appreciate when we're with a 4 that that's what's going on for them. So the object relations also allow us to develop more compassion and from different scents. 7s are starving. So the 7 is there's a very, very restless emptiness. In Buddhism, they would call it the hungry ghost. So it's a starved attachment to anything that looks like it might take away that pain of starvation, of how do I get this? Where's it? Where's it? Where's it? So, surprise, surprise that it turns into FOMO and being scattered and all over the place and chasing a million things. And when you get them, you're not fulfilled because they can't fill that thing. The hungry ghost is hungry for eternity unless it gets the illumination and the self-realization of how to soothe and hold that starvation so that it's not spending 50 incarnations grasping. So I'm giving you a bit of a Buddhist perspective on it. So that's the external focus of a 7. The restlessness, the anxiety. So the enthusiasm is a complete misnomer. It's not enthusiasm. It's starving anxiety. It's disguised as enthusiasm. So for 7, a big realization is, oh my God, this isn't enthusiasm, this is anxiety. And that's a very painful self-recognition. So every type has a moment of painful self-recognition. It's a necessary thing for the path. And that's what it looks like for 7. Okay. So let's take another look. Okay, so we spoke about the different objects. Mother, father, family. Each one in each of the triads is experiencing frustration with one of those. So let's look at the rejection triad. The 8 is frustrated with the mother. The 2 is frustrated with the father. No, sorry, let me not use frustrated. The 8 is experiencing a rejection relationship with the mother, the 2 with the father, the 5 with the whole family system and the home. So the mother wound with the 8, we'll get into each of these in more depth, but often the mother wound with the 8 will be about feeling like I wasn't adequately nurtured, I wasn't protected enough from the father. So very often what happens with an 8 is they witness violence in the family. So maybe domestic violence, the father abusing the mother and abusing the children. And then the 8's not being able to find refuge or safety with the mother. The mother maybe being quite a weak figure. And I don't mean that in a judgmental way. We've been dealing with patriarchy for centuries. But then the 8 has to be the tough one in the family who stands up for the truth and justice. So you can see how that works. So we'll go into a little bit more detail on these just now. The important thing here is in the rejection triad, one is the mother, one is the father, one is the family. So if you look at your type now, you will get more depth. How was I as a 6 frustrated with the father archetype? Why did I feel unsafe? And when I've done workshops on this before, people they've thought about it for a bit and had quite powerful realizations about how this is true. So it might not be apparent to you at first, but when you get a little bit more detail, you'll probably be able to see some of it at least. I would say also though, look at your tri-type and see how the other 2 are playing out. So in my case, 7, 9, and 4. So I've got 2 frustrations and an attachment. So go and think about how each of those is happening. How do I try and narcotize? How do I try and keep something good when I get it? And how am I frustrated / idealistic about wanting more and different? So you have to be with all 3 in your tri-type, all 3 heart wounds. I know some people really, really want to work on the main type instinct. but I really find it valuable, and my clients find it very valuable to work with the tri-type and the subtype. So just putting that out there as a start. Okay, so the text here is mainly a repetition of what's been before. Okay, so here's more detail on the actual form of the frustration for this triad. So I'm not going to read it to you. I'm going to give you a minute to just look at it for yourself and look at the relationship between starving heart and the wound. I mean, the wound and the form the frustration takes with the mother. Grief-stricken heart, father, how? So let's have a little while to look at this. Reflect for yourself, because we're going to go into breakout groups and share some of what's landed for us. So if you're not one of these types, think about it for someone you know. If you've maybe got one of these in your tri-type, just try and connect with the content in whatever way you can. And the last things there in italics are important, the lost childhood message. I found that when clients see the lost childhood message, big things hit home for them, and it's very painful. Yeah, Renate, hour.
No, not yet. Just another 10 minutes till, because we started late. But the lost childhood message, can you just articulate exactly what that means?
Sure. So the lost childhood message is the message we're longing to hear. And for each type, there's a message that they feel was most desperately missing from their life. So if a one had heard everything is okay, you're good, I love you so much, then they wouldn't have needed to develop so much of a one strategy. But obviously every type has got a missing thing. It's more or less our interpretation of whatever is missing. So for 7, it's like, I'm not going to be taken care of. I'm actually not going to be taken care of. I'm fundamentally unsafe. 6 is abandoned. 6 is I am unsafe. 5 is my needs don't matter. So for each type, there's the message they needed to hear that they didn't hear. And I found the lost childhood message rings so true for people. It's actually almost a way you could type somebody or yourself. If you really resonate with one of the lost childhood messages, that might be your real type if you're confused. So the grief-stricken heart is really a sense of, God, this life, my life. When somebody does something that's really damaging, you get a sense of, oh no, this is possible in life for somebody to do something like that. It's interpreted as, it's experienced as a grief of how imperfect the world is, how imperfect my life is, and that sense of, oh, I'm going to have to deal with this kind of suffering in this life. The stabbed heart is the thing of, oh, I'm not good enough. I'm not special enough to be important, to be loved. I'm not special enough to be loved. And the 7 is I'm going to actually starve to death. So self-praise is literally, physically. Sexually is in terms of the connection and what Ichazo calls syntony, the frequency of connection, of feeling the connection. So self-praise is much more about safety in a more literal sense. Connection is what's emphasized in the sexual. And then the social is more the parental, the father archetype of structure and belonging in a context. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next one. You've had a little bit of chance to look there. Okay, rejection triad. Again, notice your type, lost childhood message, the relationship between the heart wound and the lost childhood message, and then the strategy. You can very easily see how 5's whole strategy is built on feeling alien. So if you can't trust people, the 8th strategy there, okay, I can't trust people, I better be tough. You know what it's like when somebody lies to you and you find out, that moment of the dying heart when you find out. The 5, if my needs don't matter, I might as well die and dry my heart out forever and not believe in love. Now 5s can be quite cynical. And 2, you're not wanted. Okay, so I'm cut off from the very source of love. I'm severed from love itself. So I better find out how to manufacture love very quickly. So the path of integration for 2 to 4 is to holy origin of the 4, which is feeling the most profound and fundamental connection to the source of love. So my origin is in love. So for each of these, there's that whole dynamic. That could be another few days to look at how this works from a lines and arrows perspective. I'll just shush for a minute and let you see. This is based on the work of Belinda Gore, by the way, G-O-R-E. It's not my brilliant original thinking. She works with this stuff, and there are some lectures and things available through the Shift network. But I've captured most of it. So I think what we need to do with this Enneagram work is not to underestimate the pain. When we say passion, the word passion means suffering. Passio in Latin is suffering. So our whole strategy is built around suffering. I like to use that word instead of vice, because vice has got strong moral overtones. And basically our whole thing that we're doing is a way of living with the core pain and the heart wound. So passion is a better word. Yeah. And obviously then it has severe ethical consequences. If we're self-disconnected and we're doing what we need to do to get what we need, we're going to be very selfish. Every type can be narcissistic at the unhealthiest levels in that way. So there are ethical consequences. And our egos do wreak havoc. And there is responsibility, but I still like to have the compassion of using the word passion instead of vice, because vice is very judgmental. Okay, can I move on? I think it's time for a little break. This is probably a good time to have a 5-minute break.
Do you not want to do the 369 of this slide before we break?
Okay. Here you can really see where that 6 compliance thing comes from. You relate it to the other triad. 6 is in the compliance triad. The best way for me to get safety is to comply. Oh dear, see okay, I was frozen for a second there. If I freeze, does the slide stop sharing? Okay.
No.
Okay, good. So you'll have some entertainment if I disappear, and you'll have some silence. Guy.
Yes, Ingrid, a question. The lost childhood message is a message that we got and we lost, or is a message that we were missing?
Missing.
It's
what we really needed to hear and didn't hear, or what we most noticed was missing.
Ah, okay, very good. Yeah.
So if we have
called the missing child.
Yeah. So what we can also do for the tri-type is bring the 3 together as well, which is very helpful. Some people have really been surprised by the 3 because they thought, no, it's about the father. The performance thing is about the dad's approval, but it's not. So I was a bit surprised by that, and other people have argued about it, but I do trust this, having explored it with a few 3s. I understand it. I don't know if you want to say anything about it, Renate. Does it resonate?
For me, it resonates. Yeah. Guy, does it resonate for you?
Yes, absolutely. And on top of that, I am very connected with the 7 and the 8. When I look the 2 other type, which were very intense, are after the 3, it's the 7 and the 8. And I realized that both, all of them are related to the mother. The 3, the 7, and the 8.
Yeah. So I noticed that the mother, the father, and the families mapped to the Horneyvian. So the mother is the 3 assertives.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. You see, this is very helpful to see these patterns. Very helpful. So the primary wounding there, in your case, Guy, would be the mother, and you develop 3 strategies for handling it: an emotional, a gut, and a thinking.
And I realized that my mother had a very strong influence, much more than I thought. And I realized that after 60. Yeah.
Welcome to the club, my friend. I'm not 60 yet, but I know that when I hit 60, I'm going to feel as though I've had the biggest breakthrough of my life that I should have had when I was 20. Yeah, so that's profound, actually, to look at that. How many of them are mother? What's the mix? So mine is 794 is mother, father, family.
Yeah, it's interesting that the ones that are connected to father are compliant. So that kind of also makes sense.
Yep.
And in being assertive, when there's a mother issue, it's almost like we take on the masculine energy in response
Exactly.
to the feminine energy.
Yeah.
And then the family is the withdrawn, which makes sense. If you feel like there's a disconnect with the family, you just kind of feel lost and left out and alien and disconnected. So you withdraw from the family. So it's interesting.
That is such a helpful insight. Thank you so much for highlighting that. That's really important.
And Ingrid, I also noticed that the lost childhood message, they are so true. I was looking the different message, and based on the people I know and their type, and they are very, very, very true what you put.
Yeah. They really are. I so trust this system after having worked with this stuff. Like I used to downplay certain elements of the Enneagram and say, don't worry, take it or leave it. But after working with the object relations and seeing how true that it is, I've developed a lot more trust in being able to put things in front of people and say, go away and explore this and we'll talk about it. And they come back. And invariably, what you say.
And then this also maps to, you know, the 369 maps to the suppressed course, you know, the center, from, you know, in which they, the repressed center, or having the biggest issue with the function of the center in which you sit. But yeah, that's only, yeah. And the object relations triad or harmony triad maps to that as well, whether it's externalized, internalized, or repressed.
Awesome. Please say more about that, because that's very profound as well. And you're joining dots that I haven't joined here. So please, can you just say a bit more about that?
Well, I'm thinking out loud as it's occurring to me.
Okay.
So, you know, if we look at 369 in terms of their center, you know, they are, so they're the attachment, and they're the ones that are repress their own center. So have the biggest issues with the function. So the 3 has represses the heart center, has the biggest issue with the function of the heart. And so somehow that's connected to mother. And then the 6 has got the biggest issue with the functioning of the thinking center. That's repressed. And the 9 with the action or the body center. So yeah, I think it's an interesting, it's worth exploring.
Definitely.
Because they're all part of the same triads. Then if we,
Oh, you froze.
that's all the internalized, you know, according to the theory that I presented the last time. So I know we have this thing where we say 7 is external, but that 7 is internal, which they're a fractal, because they're looking inward to their ideas and stuff. So the 147, the frustration, then you go inside yourself because you're not getting it from external. I don't know.
So you
But there's an internalization issue, right? So of the anger, of the sadness, and of the fear goes in, and then with the attachment, it goes out. And I suppose out because I'm looking, I mean with the relations, because I'm looking out to relationship for it somehow.
That is really, really helpful. That's brilliant. Thank you. So this thing, especially the repressed function within the center is actually amazing, because if you look at this, the 3 is basically saying this feeling stuff, mother archetype, isn't working for me. That's not going to be where I'm going to get it. I better make a plan. And then for the 6 is nothing's making sense. I don't know how to make my way in the world. That's a father archetype, is the symbolic order. where things fit together and make sense. So what am I going to do? I don't know what to do. And then the 9, let's see, the strategy there is I don't know what to do about being present. How do I be visible, present, and take up my space in my life when the family is so dangerous?
But it's also, if we look at, so what the theory says, that with the 369, the center is repressed to make space, and so they have this empty shell of that center because they fill it with the other 2. So if I've got as a 3 issues with the mother that I'm not getting the love from, then I'm going to go to make space for thinking and action, which is father and family, find it there rather to fill the empty hole, and then to see how that would map for the others. You know, if I've got issues with the father, I'm going to go to the mother and the family. If I've got issues with the family, then I'm going to look to the parents, because that's what those types do, is they repress this center and rather have the other 2 centers as dominant and secondary.
That's super profound. And if this is your tri-type, the one, John Lukovich, who is an incredible teacher, he was Russ Hudson's personal assistant for 4 years, so you can imagine what he was exposed to, and he's brilliant. He says this triangle, if it's your tri-type, his nickname is Bermuda Triangle, because anything that goes in here gets lost because you don't know what to do with it. You've repressed feeling, you don't know what's going on, and you have to be invisible. So big challenge here, not more or less than any other tri-type, but a very special flavor of challenge. Okay.
So maybe we must take a break and then chew on all of that and continue after. We're at 22, so maybe back at the hour, whichever hour people find themselves in.
In 20, how many minutes?
So 8 minutes.
Oh, okay, 8-minute break.
Back at 30.
Cool.
Ingrid, do you hear me?
Yes, I do.
I saw that you made that in 2016.
What did I make?
Those presentations are coming from a work that you have done 2016. Do you wrote a book, or do you have an ebook, or?
Book in progress.
Yeah.
I'm doing my PhD on the cultivation of the inner observer. So I'm going to use the PhD as the first draft of my book.
Okay, wonderful.
That's my plan.
I will got it.
Thank you. I'll give you a signed copy. I'll courier it to you.
When do you plan to finish?
I'm hoping to get a draft in towards the end of next year. I'll see though. Running a small business, having children, and writing a PhD do have some constraints, as well as being a 7.
Yeah, welcome to the club.
Yeah. Are you writing?
Oh, I made a PhD in physics.
Oh, beautiful.
Wrote a book. Yeah.
How absolutely fantastic.
Long time ago.
Still. Physics is the most wonderful discipline. The fundamental nature of reality.
Yeah, well, the brain is also something very interesting.
Absolutely. Sorry, I'm just trying to pause recording because we're having a lovely chat. and people want to get a recording of the session, I don't even know what's going on with my settings.
You just put your webcams on, or just click on the thumbs up or something, just so that we know you're there. How wonderful to see that Getty face.
Yay!
You finally got in.
Hello, Getty. Okay, is my screen still on share?
Yes, it is.
So that's where we left off. So I'm sure that something landed for you personally in the talk through of these slides and these messages and these heart wounds, because we're getting to obviously some of the core pain here. So I think that's it for my slides. So I think what I'm going to do is, I can't show these three all at once. So I'm going to show this one, which is the overall Enneagram. And then I think we can have some breakout time now, go into small groups and have a conversation about what landed for us. And I want to give enough time for each person to be able to talk and get some reflection from the other people in the group. So just some pointers for these conversations. It's 5 minutes each. We're going to have groups of 3. So I want each person to just keep a close observation of how much time they are taking for to say what landed for them, as well as to get feedback. Because when we start going into stories and anecdotes, sometimes before we know it, the 15 minutes is up and the other 2 people haven't had a chance for reflection. So you're going to have to facilitate yourselves very nicely. So maybe in the first 30 seconds, agree who's going to be the timekeeper, so that it's 5 minutes for each person to speak and get reflection. In the reflection process, I want you to be very, very mindful of not doing interpretation, not giving an opinion, really talking about what moved you in what the person was saying. So it's an I message. It's what I felt while you were speaking was a sense of compassion or warmth, or I felt my heart opening, or I got goosebumps. It's a very personal description of your own response. It's yours and you own it. So that's important. No judgment, no criticism, no advice. I mean, as coaches, we know this stuff, but I really feel like as a facilitator, part of our role is to protect people from each other's evaluative perspective. So I want you to do that for yourselves. So I message describing your response, and a good sentence stem in your response is the word that stood out for me in what you were saying was. You say that word and you say, what I experienced when you said that word was, I felt a lump in my throat. I felt tearful. I got goosebumps. I felt an expansion of my heart. So you try to describe your own body's somatic response to what somebody said. And that's a way of absolutely ensuring that you don't intrude on that person's boundaries, and that you don't make an evaluation, and that you don't give advice. And for me, this is the essence of safety. We are creating in these groups, if we're not just doing theory and blah, blah content, we are creating a safe container in which we can transform. So the process of these groups is very, very important to me. So I really please ask you to be very conscious of what you say and don't interrupt. And before you say anything, just take some time to think what stood out, what did I notice, and how can I express that in a non-evaluative way? Like even if you want to say something positive, there's still an evaluation, an implicit evaluation if you say to someone, oh, wow, you're amazing. Because then you implicitly saying to the other people in the group, maybe you're not amazing. So there are a whole lot of things about making the conversation safe that I would like to stress, because I'm not in every group. And when I am, I'm like a real safety freak about these containers. So please be nice to each other and kind. Okay, so Renate, can you put everyone in groups of 3?
I can if you make me host.
Again? Oh, host, not just co-host.
Yeah, only host can do it.
All righty, you're in special VIP status. Okay.
So, to be clear, each person has 5 minutes in which to speak about their reflection on what they've learned, what's hit home, and within that 5 minutes to receive feedback or a reflection from the other 2 people within the 5 minutes.
Exactly. So as we had earlier, when Guy spoke about the kind of mother wound and the tri-type, that was obviously something that landed for you as a first landing. And then, Renate and I responded briefly, not in the way that I'm asking now. But so, you can say what landed, and then the other people have a chance to reflect back. 5 minutes, next person, same process. Cool, everybody?
All right.
Cool.
Make
See you
host so I
in
can make the
15. Oh, I have to stop share again to do it. I forgot.
yes.
Okay.
Okay. We've got 19, so we'll have 6 rooms and we'll have 15 minutes with a minute to come back. All righty, so we're going to break out, just looking at who got who here in 3, 2, 1.
Hello. Melody, are you there?
I am. I'm just trying to work out how to.
Okay. Cool. He's in the dark. Hello. Cool. How's it going, Gail?
Good. Thank you. Nice to see you.
You too. Okay, who wants to go first? I'll do timekeeping if you want.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay, who's going to go first?
I don't mind.
Okay, cool. Okay, so what stood out to land it for you?
Okay, so that you are safe. That sense of which comes for me as a 9 and 6. So strong father. So for me, I really think that element of safety is a big issue or a big concern. In so many ways, I live my life around setting that up and keeping the boundaries of who can come in, and then that causes a conflict, uncertainty, not an uncertainty, an ambivalence with feeling wanted and not wanted. So withdrawn, but they don't want me, and so. And then when I'm excluded, like in family strife, but yet I want to be excluded in some ways, or I want to keep safe. So for me, I think that absolutely resonates. And that safety, even recently I was offered amazing work to do out of the blue, not having worked most of the year with my company to go to Botswana to do training for a new lodge. And I just felt too unsafe at this COVID time just to go out of my comfort zone, and I turned it down.
Gail, can I ask you, just for context and resonance, What is your subtype and tri-type?
Okay, so I'm 926.
Okay. Yeah, okay, so that sheds some light there.
Yeah.
So 2 are very preoccupied with safety, and then the 2 is the rejection, inclusion, love piece.
Yeah. Yeah.
And did you say?
I think I might need a personal coaching session with you to understand it properly.
Sure.
Joking. Or not.
So, wow, so something really landed for you there, and I'm hearing that like the contraction in my heart is around that rejection feeling, the feeling wanted and not wanted, and that for me that there's an unsafety element that links with that.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So,
Melody, what was your experience of listening? What stood out for you?
Well, you spoke about passion, suffering. Passion means suffering. Can you hear me?
No, your sound is really bad. Can't hear you at all. Not a bit. That, like, you are unsafe, you are unseen, you aren't worth loving. You know, those lost childhood, the message that we interpret, it's all the same in a sense of there's some missing safety, missing connection.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, yeah, so 2 out of those are father ones, the 2 and the 6. So there it's, you know, that 2 slide was talking about the disavowal of the masculine and saying, you know, I have to be super feeling based in order to connect, because the masculine doesn't work. There's not going to be connection from the masculine. I'm choosing the feminine.
Yes. Yeah.
And then the father weren't there. You said the looking for the masculine connection in the brothers. So how does that work with them?
In what?
Like, what do you have to do or be to get safety with your brothers?
Fit in. Fit in.
And what does that look like? Is it the way of thinking? Do you have to be a football fan? Do you have to have their interests? What do you have to do?
Yeah, got to have their interests, got to affirm them a lot, got to deter to their interests, to their achievements,
Oh.
And their interests. I think so.
Wow.
So it's 9, isn't it? That's very 9. You're
Yes.
more important than me.
Yes, going along with their stuff.
Going along to get along.
And did you say that you self-praise?
No, social.
Okay.
Yeah, social. Yeah.
It's fascinating, hey, the dynamic.
It is. It is. There's so much truth in this. It's actually, I get goosebumps right now.
I just got goosebumps as you got goosebumps. Totally. Yeah, the stuff is very powerful. Very. And then, yeah, there's compliance and withdrawal in the 926.
Compliance, yes. Yeah.
So it's like I'm going to go along with you and I'm going to be invisible. I would guess it's like the overall strategy.
Yeah. In general. in general. I mean, when I've gone through phases in my life of being a bit rebellious and not, but overall.
Interesting.
Overall.
It's interesting to hear that it does resonate with you, that you're seeing truth in it.
Yeah, I see a lot of truth in a lot of this stuff. Yeah, and I see it with the people that I've done, a few that I have done with. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. But for me, the question then is, what are the, using the paths to grow from it? That you can't grow if you don't see it and feel it and understand it.
Mm.
But then it's getting free.
Yeah. And that key of actually recognizing the core suffering and being able to accept it, like being able to recognize, accept, interpret, and do a kind of non-attached observation. So that's the RAIN, R-A-I-N acronym for one of the ways of experiencing and growing your self-compassion and self-observation, is being able to recognize those strategies, especially when they kick in. Like when you feel yourself doing whatever you do to fit in, like, oh, I see myself doing that. And then interpreting it, yeah, you're going to have access to the Enneagram as an interpretive strategy. And then, so it's recognize, accept with compassion, then interpret using whatever frameworks you've got at your disposal. And then the N is observing that whole process with non-attachment. So not trying to fix, not trying to change, just observe with gentle love. And that's apparently the recipe.
Apparently.
Well, it's kind of the best I've come across so far. So we
yeah, that's good. Correct. That's wise thing. Yeah. Otherwise we go into that. This is what you must do, and that doesn't really work.
Yeah, I think any kind of panel beating approach is very super ego driven.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't.
It's recognize, accept, interpret,
and non-attachment, but it's very compassionate self-observation in the non-attachment in. Sorry, I'm giving you advice which I banned for other people, so I'm very
but that's mindfulness.
Because I can't talk. Can you hear me now?
Yes,
No.
yes.
You can. Oh, okay.
Not well at all.
Okay. So, well, as a 4, not being able to talk is not the greatest thing in the world.
Oh, it's not
yeah.
So I'm sorry that you're having this issue.
Yes.
It's not good.
Okay. I think it's too late now anyway for me to share, but I've found this very interesting.
Yeah, your sound is really problematic, especially because we're recording.
Yes, I'll have to sort it out. I don't know what's gone wrong. Okay. But thank you for the exposure.
Okay.
Is everyone going to hear this, Ingrid?
Yeah, I have to see if I can edit people's personal stuff out if they don't want it shared.
Ing?
Yeah.
I'm feeling.
Okay, cool. So we've got some more time. Maybe Melody, you can sort out your mic in the meantime.
I don't know what to do about it. Is it a bit better now?
Yes, that's better.
Tiny bit. Okay, let's give it a go. I'm going to pause.
You want to tell them about the recordings?
Oh, yeah, I'm gonna upload these recordings on a YouTube channel that I've created. There's already a lot of Enneagram material there, like as many Tom Condon videos as I could find, etc. I'll be uploading some of my other material there. So it's going to be quite a nice kind of repository of video material, including some of these community of practice sessions. So
what do we search for on YouTube?
I think it's called Ingrid Hurwitz Tuck Dear Enneagram or something like that. but we can email the link. So by tomorrow, I'll have uploaded that thing. It usually takes a couple of hours for a long video.
Okay, great. Because in being December, there's so many people that couldn't make the session today that have asked for recordings.
Yeah. So it still lacks a bit of professionalism and polish and all kinds of nonsense going on, but I think they'll improve with time. Cool. So let's talk a little bit about what landed for us and what we noticed ourselves talking about in the breakout rooms. We've got 15 minutes. So anybody who feels like something really landed that they'd like to share, if you're comfortable sharing on a recording, of course. So who feels like saying something? Natasha! I thought you were reaching for your unmute button, but you weren't.
Recording, sorry.
Yeah. Natasha, I'm inviting you.
I don't know what to say, actually. I thought that this was an amazing session. I'm still processing a lot of stuff. And there was one of the things that was really interesting to experience when I first saw. I'm a 4 with a 471 tritype, so it's all frustration. I was seeing the slide, it resonated hugely, and so I started my processing. But what I experienced is, by sharing this, all of a sudden it changed. My experience changed, and I could see things more clearly and let them go. It was kind of a release. It was like, and so at one point I said, I can really feel now that these are only feelings, these are only thoughts, and none of it is real. So I can just relax and do my stuff and move on, because everything's fine. I'm loved, I'm whatever. So that there was a really interesting experience, and I'm sure I would not have had it without sharing this out loud, because I was still processing it in my head without really connecting with my heart. And so the whole experience was amazing, and I can still feel like it's going on, and stuff will. It even changes now how I look at my family, at my dad, at my mom. So it's really interesting. So thank you for this.
Power, thank you. Let's just be quiet for a few seconds, because I don't want to rush. I also want to let what you said kind of sink in. So let's just let that happen. Yeah, and I think this kind of work, because it is deep, it's going to take time to process. So you might notice you have dreams, stuff might surface that is kind of new. So, but that thing you said of when you said, I'm okay, like for me, it sounded like boom, equanimity. You had a moment of your virtue in your heart. That's what it felt like to me. Like I suddenly experienced it myself. I got goosebumps on my calves, which was a really nice feeling of release. I experienced when you said the word release, I could connect with that. Cool, thank you. Who else would like to offer a reflection on what happened for them encountering this knowledge, wisdom? Getty, you can see I'm smiling at you. Sloan, you want to say something?
Sloan, right?
You wave, yeah.
Hello. This is my first training, and it's been amazing. So thank you all for being so welcoming and gracious. And this has been incredible. So I thank you. I am a social 387. So being that I had, what was unique is that I had a little bit of everything: attachment, frustration, rejection, but they were all fell into the mother. And at first I was a little bit taken back by that because my mother's my best friend. However, there has been a lot of resistance in our relationship throughout the years, a lot of obstacles, a lot of growing together. And I have found my own personal growth has come when I've been intentional with addressing that trauma and been intentional with building that relationship, and been and have come from it rather than holding her to a ridiculous standard that I did as a child and a teen and in my early 20s. Now that I've become a mother and have worked on myself and my self-awareness journey, I have approached our relationship and her with so much more compassion, admiration, and grace, which I have then got to turn on myself to have that compassion for myself, that grace for myself. And even as a 3, Stephen and Amanda helped me clarify, of constantly seeking that attachment through external validation, through offering that same admiration to my mother, I was able to internalize it for myself. And so that was my biggest aha moment with, I need to call my mom and say I'm sorry and thank you.
Wow. Sure. I'm so touched by what you're saying. I feel really tearful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. It's beautiful, very moving.
Thank you for the insight, and thank you to Stephen and Amanda for helping me walk through it.
Yeah, that safe space in which to hear oneself talk. Yeah, sounds like that was a lovely experience for you with them. Thank you so much. Getty. Thanks, Sloan.
It was a beautiful space with Lynn and Ken. I felt very safe and held. I don't know them at all. It was beautiful. And Renate was with us some of the time. And for me, I'm a 268, the rescuer. And I lived mostly in my 20s and teens. I lived in my 8. And what really came to me so powerfully is, hey, it's time to get exploring my 6 and get into that space, because I'm afraid of ambivalence. It really scares me. And so if it scares me, let me jump in there and find out what's going on. So I got a challenge out of it for myself, and it felt like a beautiful invitation to do some more work. And I'm really grateful. Thank you.
And are you able to share with us a little bit about what you feel like that work might look like for other people with a 6 in their tri-type? Maybe you can offer some insight into what we can do.
Well, I've spent so much of my life ensuring that I'm going to be okay and not be fearful. And one of the things I'm really interested in exploring is my relationship with authority figures, because I had such a difficult relationship with both of my parents as a child. And I have either idealized or denigrated authority figures. It's been very much the polarities that Renate has been teaching us about this year. So complete idealization on the one hand and total denigration on the other. And what more subtle things could I find in my relationship with authority? And what is the relationship with my own authority over myself?
Wow.
So it's opening a line of inquiry that truly I haven't thought of before. So it feels like whoa, this is a biggie, and I'm shit scared, but I'm going to do it.
Trailblazing into the mystery.
Isn't the 6 also not about being alone in the world, Getty? It's like being with someone. Just saying.
Wow. Yeah, this is very powerful. Hey, I mean, when you say it's a biggie, and Natasha and Sloan as well, it sounds like these are substantive insights at a heart level. It's not just, oh, this is an interesting piece of information, like some of these other triads are sometimes like, okay, that's helpful. But here we're talking about like, whoa, something lands and shifts, and it's quite primary, which is what the theory says it is, but I'm seeing that that's real.
So I found something. Yeah, I found, thanks, Ingrid and Renate. It's been a superb session, really. Your work's amazing. What I found really interesting for me is, as a 3, I could really relate to, you know, what you highlighted on the attachment to mother and the loss of connection, particularly, you know, probably in my earlier years. And my tri-type is 368. In terms of the lost childhood message, I relate a lot to the lost childhood message of the 6. And I think what's coming up for me is, you know, how much time I spend in the 6, you know, as the 3-6, you know, as the 3 moves around rapidly around the triangle. So I think that's been a very interesting insight for me, and it's something that I've been looking at for a while, you know, really looking at how much time I am spending in 6. I mean, we know now that, you know, the theory around integration and disintegration, release and stress have changed. And yeah, I'm finding that very interesting, and that would be, you know, my next development area. So that was useful for me. Thank you.
So may I ask a similar question to what I asked Getty from if you explore that 6, which was also what he wanted to explore, for you, what would be your line of inquiry? Like, how are you going to work with this insight that you've gleaned?
Well, for me, it's about catching myself with, you know, having that inner observer, catching myself when particularly I'm in my fear or not feeling safe, and interrogating that a little bit more, finding out, you know, what's really going on, where is it rooting from, and, you know, then working with moving up to, through consciousness, to like maybe the next level of the, in terms of the levels of health and development.
And can you elaborate on what you mean by rooting from? I think that's an unusual metaphor for me, and I'm curious about what it means for you. Marlene's frozen on my side. Marlene, you unfroze?
Yeah. I think, you know, rooting from is just, you know, maybe looking at it, you know, from the base, from where it stems from.
Do you mean in the moment, in your immediate experience? Like, is it an emotion or a trigger, or are you talking about interpreting your past? Like, where are you going to...
No, it's more around catching myself in the moment, not, you know, having that inner observer and checking in with what's really going on. So, you know, certainly, you know, not in the moment going back or into the past, but just noticing what's going on, breathing into it, and then thinking through, well, what's really going on for me? Is it true, false, don't know? And, you know, if it's false, then moving on. If it's true, then what do I choose to do about it? And if it's don't know, well, what more information do I need to find out?
Thank you. Thank you. So I just want to check the chat. Getty's giving us these wonderful tri-type archetypes. Renate's given us a downloadable document. These things are great. Renate?
So my child is a self-preservation 7. She just turned 20. And when I look at the description of the lack in the mother that would cause somebody to be a 7, the mother was not enough mirroring, not enough whatever, and as a self-pres 3 myself, like, I can tell you that I was going to be the best fucking mother on the planet, and I bust myself to be that. And I've read it, but I still feel the pang. I've read the theory that says it's not about the parent, it's about your perception of, you know what I mean? Because if I think of how, I was at home with my baby, and I couldn't get enough of her. When she used to fall asleep, I used to just keep holding her for 2 hours and staring at her, and I've been obsessed with her, and I don't know how I could have mirrored more, but I did work. I wasn't there 24 hours a day. I worked from home, and I had somebody taking care of her, but I kept an eye, and if she did cry, I could get up from my laptop and run and be there for her. Well, it wasn't a laptop in those days, but anyway. But yeah, so I've read that it isn't the parent, it's the perception. Yeah. Somehow we receive that message despite our parents' best efforts, but I know the horror and the sadness and the failure I feel when I read that description of the mother of the 7. Yeah, and it's really interesting that her thing is mother, my thing is mother. My mother was a 7, and her issue was mother, and has been for generations. My mother hated her mother. My sister hates her mother. But it's mother issues.
Wow.
And so, and born out of this, all this assertiveness. If we look at the mother, you get the assertive, aggressive, masculine response, which we all have. Wow. So, interesting themes in family dynamics.
That is really, really great that you brought that in. The parental perspective and the kind of family constellation pattern. I think both of those are incredibly helpful. And I've got to say, I had the same reaction when I read these things, like, oh my God, my poor son. Oh my God, my poor daughter. She's a 7 and my son's a 5. And I just look at these and, the self-recrimination and guilt. And it's, thank you for highlighting that. And let's be self-compassionate, because one way or another, our kids land on the Enneagram and have a type and have a heart wound. And so did our parents, and it's part of life, it's part of our journey. And that self-compassion, thank you for inviting. I feel invited to remind everybody who's got kids that in some way it's inevitable. And it could even be something really small that gets amplified in the child's mind. Like, there are 100 examples of where you were right there to feed them, but that 1 minute that you couldn't hear them because you were using the blender suddenly triggers a whole thing, so please, let's be kind. I just want to see what Sloan said. Yes, my mama heart needed that reminder. Thank you, Renata. Thank you. We can all walk away from here feeling like I'm not evil.
Yeah.
Let's see, Getty. Our nervous system cannot distinguish between what is real and imagined. Absolutely. My daughter sometimes comes up with these stories about when she was little that are completely false. Like, remember when that happened? I'm like, no, that didn't happen. I don't want to gaslight her, but quite honestly, she's made it up. Okay. Who else wants to say something? Mary, Guy, did you put your hand up?
Oh, go ahead, Getty.
No.
Okay, I was just going to say something very quick, and that is that
33, but I want to say I'm happy to stay on for a while. So whoever wants to talk and listen, I'm letting the session run over. So whoever needs to drop off, just bye-bye and wave. If you wouldn't mind, maybe put a comment in the chat about whether it was a 10 out of 10 or a 3.2. But let me say, Mary, can you go ahead?
I was just going to follow on with what the others had said. I have a son who's a 2 and a daughter who's a 6, and I was greatly relieved to see that their issues relate to their father, because I'm always call him regularly. It was when I was studying psychotherapy or whatever. I used to call him, go, oh my God, I've just read this thing. Did I do that to you? And he got so sick of listening to me bleed all over the place because I was so concerned that I'd ruined my children. So today, yay, it's about their dad.
It's not because you told them how awful your dad is, and that's what made it about their dad.
Anyway, I just wanted to say that because I was relieved, deeply relieved when I saw that.
I know, I can get that. Oh,
I got plenty of insights for myself, but I just wanted to share that with the other mothers.
Thank you. Cheers, Ken. Bye, Jane. Cheers. So who else would like to reflect? I don't feel like going yet. I want to hear what everyone's got to say. Hi, Chelsea. Do you want to talk?
No,
or are you saying goodbye?
Hand up.
You're
on mute. I think your hand up.
Sorry, my unmute wouldn't work. I actually had a question that I put through to the room that I was in. So I've just written it down to remind myself, a self-praise 269, the Good Samaritan. And of course, it was very interesting for me to see that mine was all about sort of rejection from the father figure. But I'm not understanding when those were the actual events that happened, because that's what did happen in my life. My mother got divorced first when I was 6 months old. She then married a man who was an absolute narcissist, and I was terrified and afraid of. And I was living in a step family that I've never ever felt I belonged in. So those were the actual events. But now also you're saying, according to this triangle, that is my pattern as well. So how does that play out?
I'm not quite sure I'm understanding the question of, are you saying that the object relation thing is not just interpretation for you, but it was literal and now it's been internalized as a pattern? That's kind of what I'm hearing, but I'm not sure that I'm hearing you.
Okay, so the object relations is rejection by the father. Okay, but in actual fact, that was what literally happened in my life. So does the object relations pattern cause me then to magnify what those circumstances were? How does it play out? Because I've always had those feelings and I've always known that pattern, but I blamed it on what actually happened.
Well, I think, yeah, to appreciate that it really did happen and that you developed an ego strategy for coping with it, and that the genesis was in an actual literal wound that you interpreted in the two way, as that the foundation of the two strategy is that experience of rejection. I mean, I wouldn't invalidate your experience as the kind of root cause of how you think about relationships. Am I hearing you?
But does it get magnified by this triangle that we've talked about today?
I would imagine so, because memory is selective and we've got confirmation bias. So there's a whole lot of cognitive bias that might be playing out. Like if we're anticipating rejection, we're going to elicit it in one way or another. So it could be, I would guess, I mean, I'm not a cognitive psychologist or whatever I would need to be to have an opinion, but my guess would be that once the strategy gets rolling and once it starts working, we start reinforcing it. And then we start thinking that it's the only way, which is why it then becomes a fixation and it becomes quite rigid, that we get stuck in this particular strategy of dealing with reality. And then that kind of ossification of a certain stance limits us from seeing the extent to which it might be a distortion. So it could be a massive distortion or it could be a small distortion. But I would definitely guess that confirmation bias is playing into it. Does that make sense?
For example, I had been a 5 that didn't have this dominance of feeling rejection by the father, I would have then handled it completely differently.
Yeah.
I've come in and if I'm understanding it, but I think I'm seeing that for a lot of people that I know, including myself, that was true. You know, like the slide for the 7 mothers says, or for the 3 says your mother was preoccupied. My mother was an SX7 and she was preoccupied. She had lots of interests and she was in theater and she was busy doing a lot of things. She had a very full life outside of her children. You know, and that's great. You know, what serves and disserves. Like, it was wonderful to have a role model of a mother who had her own life in the late 60s and early 70s. You know, somebody that was interested and studied and you know, sang opera and did all kinds of interesting things. So her life was full and varied and fabulous. You know, she was making herself happy in a lonely marriage. So that was it. It was true. And I see for like I was thinking of a 9 and a 5 clients of mine. They were rejected by they were outside the family. They felt not a part of. They felt rejected by the family system. They were not like the family, you know, and both parents kind of were, you know, favoring the other kids. And they were kind of on the fringe. And I see that to be true. So
did we put ourselves there because of having this pattern? Because it is what played out in reality, as you say, was exactly what your pattern is. But because we have this pattern, did we put ourselves in a place like your 9 client? They actually were part of the family, but they chose to then be out of it because of the pattern.
Yes. And did I perceive my mother as preoccupied because I am so independent and doing my own thing and don't need her or anybody? Yeah. And my 5 client actually just wanted to be left alone by the family. Yeah, I hear you. That's a really important reflection. I think, Stephen.
So I just want to say something about that before we move on. So what I'm hearing here, and I concur with, is that there is a literal reality that is, say, the lack of safety in the head center. It either arises from the mother, the father, or the whole family. And then the best strategy for coping with that, if you're a head center wired type, there's a genetic predisposition to being a head center type. So if you have that predisposition to anxiety circuit being activated at a subcortical level and you feel unsafe in context, either with the mother, the father, or the whole setup, you're going to choose the best strategy, which is either 5, 6, or 7. And the same recipe for type within each of the centers. So you start with the genetic predisposition in one of the circuits, anxiety, rage, or sadness. And then depending on the nature of the wound, you develop a strategy, which is the type. So that's how I would synthesize this conversation.
So may I ask a question? And did you had you finished, Ingrid?
Stephen wanted to say something. In, you're on mute.
Sorry, Stephen had his hand up, so I want to go there. If you can hold your question for a sec, Lynn.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks. Ingrid, I think I basically want you to concur with what you were saying now, is that I don't think it's situational, or our parents make us take on a certain ego strategy. I think we do have it's a nature-nurture question. We do have a predisposition, and certain things will get turned on by from the situation,
Exactly.
contextually. So it's probably a 50-50, nature-nurture 50-50. We don't know.
Yeah. So this is where Dan Siegel is amazing. So I didn't know how well he knew the Enneagram. I just thought, oh, he's a neuroscientist, wada. But then I heard him at the Enneagram Summit, and he was talking about the Enneagram in relation to this neurobiology, and I would highly recommend going and finding that talk.
You can buy the whole summit for $123. So.
Yep. Guess who did that? Got a backlog. I've got such a backlog of gluttonously purchased conferences. Yeah, Natasha, you too. Okay, let's go back to what Lynn wanted to say or ask.
I've got a gluttonous problem too. I did the same thing, Ingrid. I bought the whole thing. But I did listen to Dan, and it was really phenomenal, as you said. So my question really piggybacks off Stephen, and that is the nature-nurture question here, because as I've been listening to this, it seems we're moving a little bit more towards the nurture component, rather than, I'm just wondering, so could I have been maybe you could speak to that, because we've looked a lot at kind of how the ego structure plays out, but what about the nature element of this?
So my sense is that the center is very strongly nature. So if you have an 8 baby, that creature is incredibly robust from minute 1. 8s have a very high pain threshold intrinsically. You can see an 8 child run into a pole, fall flat on their back and get up. It's not a choice. Whereas 6 babies, people who turn out to be 6s are generally more fretful, they don't sleep as well, etc., etc. So I would really put my head on a block about the fact that the center is genetic and hardwired. And then the actual type strategy in using the combination of the strengths of the center in reaction to the context and type of wound forms the type. So if I'm a head type, I'm vigilant, I'm able to process things intellectually, and with that wiring and with that center so predominant in my behavior, in my wiring, I'm then going to respond to safety issues in one of 3 ways. So if something's wrong with the whole family, I end up a 5. If it's my dad, I'll be a 6. Well, I'll choose a 6 approach preconsciously. And if it's my mom, I'm going to find the 7 strategy works best. So that would be my sense based on the Dan Siegel, the Belinda Gore, and anecdotal exposure to a lot of people. Does that ring true for you?
Well, yes, I have a very high pain threshold. I was a pretty robust baby, I think.
Are you an 8?
I'm an 8, social 8, 3. I'm an 8, 3, 7, but a social 8. So
mother. Triple mother.
Pardon?
Triple mother.
Is that right?
So 8, 7, and 3 are all mother-based things.
So what's the implication of that, Ingrid?
I'm asking you.
Oh.
I'm just saying there's the theory maybe you've got reflection on that.
Well, I think the mother wound is huge in my world. However, in our little group, one of the members of the group spoke about their mother, who is, the mention was made of a shift possibly before her passing in terms of healing. And what came to me subsequently, and I don't know if this bears any relevance to this, maybe it does, but the night my mother died, my dad came home from the hospital. She basically had a staph infection that killed her. You know, the penicillin resistant staph infection started in the April. She died in the December. My dad came home from the hospital that night, and I just knew that I had to go and visit her for some reason. I just said, you know, he'd come and we'd had dinner, and he had the baby, and my baby was there, and I just said, I need to go to the hospital. Long story short, as I walked into the hospital, she was being wheeled out and taken to a side room, and I was told she was dying. So I got to be with her in that side room. She couldn't talk at this point. And I had to, I got the opportunity to just keep her mouth moist with a little sponge. And it felt like a really significant moment. And in that space, I was really able to tell her that I knew she'd done the best that she could.
Wow. And
I knew that, and I was able to just communicate with her in a way that it was actually very healing. So, I mean, this wound is very, very big, but I don't know, just even reflecting on this as I listened in the group, and that shift toward healing before death. I don't know what the significance of it is, but it's kind of resonating in my mind right now, my heart right now.
Wow.
The triple mother wound. Yeah, it was pretty excruciating, Ingrid.
Wow. Thank you. Let's just be with that for a second. It was a very beautiful and moving, touching thing that you shared with us, and I'm really grateful for your vulnerability. So I just want us to appreciate that for a bit before anyone says anything. I'm sure, I would imagine, that a lot of our relational things with our mothers are exposed in a sense by what you've shared. You know, a lot of us have been speaking about our relationships with our mothers. And so it's a very tender place that you've touched. At least I can speak for myself. Especially that moment where you spoke about wiping her lips with a sponge. It was quite heartbreaking, so thank you for that.
Quite a paradox, isn't it? Such violence and that picture.
So what really arises for me is the distinction between the internal object of the mother and the real mother. So healing the mother wound is something we do internally. And sometimes we're lucky enough to get those moments with somebody before they die where we experience a literal healing in the real world. But whether we do or not, we still have to work with the internal sense of the mother. So I think it's good to know that there's a difference between the real mother and the inner idea of the mother that you've lived with your whole life. And even if your relationship with the parent changes in real life, you know, that parent Like my mom, she's so fragile. She's old. She's had osteoporosis. She's a foot taller than shorter than she used to be. So she's not the mother that I imagined, and my relationship with her has completely changed. But in my childhood construction of the maternal figure who wasn't meeting my needs, that's what I need to grapple with, not with my real mom. The only thing to do with my real mom is be there for her and be sweet to her and take her flowers. No, I can't expect her to have a part in healing my mother wound where she is now, As an adult, it's like I'm doing the inner work. And Lynn, would I resonate? Just say to her, you're amazing. You did your best. I said that to the other day, despite having the mother wound myself as a 7. I said to you, everything that you think is good about my parenting of my daughter, I learned from you. Everything that I've learned that I like about myself, I learned from you. And I think those conversations are the conversations we should have with our actual parents. And all the projection or blame or wounding, to take ownership of it as the inner work for ourselves. I don't know, that's my sense of what it means to do work as an adult. It's like beyond the age of 23, we don't need to trash our parents. I don't know. I mean, that sounds quite judgmental, but that's my sense for myself. Renate?
I really, what's really standing out is the conversation triggered by Sue, in that we can look at the parent wounding, but the flip side, which is taking ownership, what are you pretending not to notice about your role in the problem, is that we have equal ownership in the creation of that wound. Do you know what I mean? We're not victims of whatever that parent, my mother was preoccupied, but I was so independent. I was off showing her probably from day dot that I didn't need her or anybody else. You know what I mean? So I feel like that, that we have co-creation in it. And I think that's an important part of the work that we have to do. We have to see who we fundamentally were, that our parents were also responding to that.
Yeah.
And also maybe don't have a way of perceiving it. Like when I see my daughter's fear and my daughter sees my self-esteem, shame, and sadness issues, we have no way of relating to it. Like when she's going, is the door locked? Does the electric fence work? Lock the car door. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, that makes no sense. Like, that's not even on my radar. I just completely don't relate, And when my 8 friend looks at my self-esteem and shame issues, she goes, oh, get rid of that stuff. Like, what even is that? So we don't relate. And so it's like, how can we respond to it when we have no way of seeing it even? So how could a mother or a father see any neediness in a 3 child? I was off. I would walk at age 4. I'd walk to my older brother and sister school and walk around the school and try and find them. Like, I didn't need anybody, So there's that independence. So you see that child is very happy all by herself doing her thing. It's like, what are you going to do? My mother is going to carry on, singing and going off to her, lectures and doing the million things that she did. So, I really think that there's ownership with that. We need to see who we fundamentally came into the world, that we created it as much as our parents created it. And yes, the issues with the mother, father, or the family, or whatever the case may be, but it's also with us.
That's really helpful, because we create these strategies very early and then they become self-fulfilling.
Exactly.
So I think the one perspective I have on that is we don't choose our family. So in a sense, we are victims of, say, abuse, and then we've got to deal with it with a strategy. But I've got a totally different perspective on that. which is more my default perspective, is that we fundamentally choose our struggles before we're born in the bardo, in the gap between lives. We say, okay, I'm going to learn that thing and bring it on. And I mean, that's a very metaphysical belief, and some people probably think I'm shrooming, but I live from that sense of, like, it's a radical responsibility in a sense, or an acceptance of the fact that this is my deck of cards, and actually I chose it at a profoundly spiritual level as the highest good that's going to lead me. Well, my choice for this lifetime is show me the truth of love. And a lot of that is involved encountering things that are definitely not love and have been really awful. But through that, I know the truth of love, or a lot about it, because of those things. So that's my kind of very esoteric perspective on it. And I read something incredible by Almas today about that. I think I'll send it to you, Renate, and maybe you can put it in an email when we send out the link to my YouTube channel. But just a very powerful expression of the fact that our highest self leads us into even traumatic situations for our highest good.
Unquestionably.
Well,
Also, then,
yeah,
we need to take ownership of the lost childhood message.
Yeah. I really do. You know, it said for the seven, like, not enough stimulation. Like, there isn't a parent on the planet that could have given that kid enough stimulation.
Hey, that's the truth. Damn, is my mother boring. She's only read Shakespeare, Keats, Yeats.
Yeah, so, you know, it's, I really think that we have to look at the reciprocal relationship with this, that I think we disserve if we teach too much about, you know, it's the parents, it's the wounding of the parent, but it's perceived, and how did we participate? How were we co-creators in that? You know, that it wasn't possible actually for the parent to not inflict that wound.
Thank you.
Given who you are.
That is so helpful, because it provides like a really lot of compassion for the parent and ourselves. And it involves that beautiful kind of serenity, equanimity, non-attachment. Like, in that accessing of that attitude, all the virtues become available. And that's, I think, is such a release.
It sounds like Enneagram theory is then shifting.
In what way?
Well, it seems to be an emphasis on the childhood wound, and it all comes from the parent. It's not what we're saying now.
Mm-hmm. No.
Unless I haven't read widely enough, I don't know.
I don't think so, because in the childhood wound is intrinsically an interpretation, and in the lost childhood message, there's an interpretation that is with the child, and it has to be one of 9. So I think it's just an appreciation that we're trying to get of, this is our journey, this is my journey, and the obstacle is the path. You know, that everyone's come here to learn something, and if you kind of blame your parents, blame your life, blame your circumstances, it's going to, you're not going to learn what you need to learn. So it's not saying it's the parents' fault. It's just that very early childhood is the origin of the ego structure. Natasha, you've got to go. It's so beautiful to see you again. Thank you. I've also got to go soon. I'm doing the 7th thing. I'm so preoccupied with the Enneagram, I'm neglecting my daughter.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Love you.
Wonderful to see you all. Have a beautiful festive season, Christmas.
Lovely to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Kath. Bye, Gail.
Bye. That was great. Thank you.
Love.
Bye.
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 Bye.